going to 11. Hi, I'm Ken Ray, welcoming you into episode 207 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. macOS 10, well, I was going to say is no more, but it is still a thing. It's just not the latest thing. Thursday, the 12th of November, is the official release date for Big Sur, aka macOS 11. We're hitting some of the new operating system security and privacy features on this edition of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. Apple heralds macOS Big Sur as the operating system's biggest design update in over a decade. But it's not just about a new coat of paint. Lots has gone into the privacy and security sides of this fall's updates. SecureMac's Nick Leone has been digging through some of those changes, and he joins us to talk about those. Gosh, Nick, it's been so long. Glad to have you back with us.
Glad to be back. Thank you.
So you've written up some of the features that we'll be discussing today for the SecureMac site, if people want to check that out. I want us to hit them in three ways. We'll start first under the hood, and then we'll do some of the more accessible stuff, and then finally improvements that are, really pretty personal. Let's start, though, with Big Sur's signed system volume.
So Apple's been moving to protect system files for a while now, right? In the last macOS, Catalina, right? For example, Apple split off system content from everything else on the Mac into its own read-only volume. And the idea is you're going to keep all of the critical system files separate from everything else and make it all read-only so that, you basically made sure nobody could overwrite it with anything, either accidentally or maliciously. And then basically the only way for, say, malware to mess with the system volume in Catalina would be to get it to mount as writable somehow, and then to make changes to it. So in Big Sur, that separate system volume is just going to get an extra layer of protection through cryptographic hashing. Okay,
I know that is something that we've talked about on the checklist before when discussing other topics, but could we have a quick refresher on cryptographic hashing?
Okay, so just for anybody maybe who didn't hear those shows, when we talk about cryptographic hashing, all that basically means is you take an input value, you run it through a mathematical algorithm called a hashing algorithm, and you get some output of fixed length, like a 256-bit number or something, and that output's called the hash value. And so the neat thing about these hashing algorithms is they always produce a consistent output. Like as long as you're putting the same thing into them every time, and it doesn't matter what that is, like whether it's a number or a sentence or a password or a gigantic block of code, whatever, you're always going to get the same output. And if you make like the tiniest change to that input value, like if you change a lowercase a to a capital A, or if you change a 5 to a 6 or something, you get a totally different output. So they're great for detecting whether or not something's been changed. And say you want to check to see whether or not a file has been changed since the last time you looked at it. If you know what hash value you should get after running the legit file through a hashing algorithm, then if you run whatever you're inspecting through that same algorithm and you don't get the number you're expecting, you don't get the right value, there's a problem. Something's changed. So that could mean like a data corruption issue, or it could mean that somebody or something has tried tampering with the file.
Okay, so then in Big Sur, it sounds like the OS is almost like taking a couple of snapshots of itself and then laying one picture on top of the other one to make sure that they match. Is it comparing its current state to a recent state, or is there something else that I'm missing?
That's essentially it, right? The snapshots that we're talking about are all done through cryptographic hashing. So signed system volume means you're going to use hashing to check the integrity of system files when you install, and then when you update or even just boot up your Mac. And basically what happens is every file in that system volume is going to get run through a hashing algorithm, and those resulting hash values, right, that number that you're looking for, right, is going to be stored in the file system metadata. And every time you update or boot, your Mac's going to run the system files it finds currently in the system volume through that same hashing algorithm and compare it to what it finds stored, right, to what it's expecting, basically. And if there's any difference, macOS won't boot. So you'll either have to like reinstall or install from an earlier clean backup, which is good, right? I mean, it may be inconvenient, but it's good because if there is some difference in the hash values, it means something's wrong. So either the system files have some corruption issue or something has somehow maliciously tampered with critical files. And in either case, you do not want your Mac to boot up.
Okay, so the next under-the-hood feature that we want to look at, the great kext phase-out continues. And not unlike what we were talking about a moment ago. I know this is something we have hit on the show before, but it's also been a while. Can you remind me what we're talking about?
Well, there's a reason it sounds familiar, because this has been kind of talked about for over a year now. So kexts are kernel extensions. And whenever we talk about the kernel, like in the context of computing, we're talking about the core of the OS. So it's very important, and it's like the last place you want anyone or anything messing around. And kernel extensions are just extra bits of code that can, kind of as the name implies, extend the functionality of the kernel. And so these would be written by like developers to help their apps or devices do what they need to do on a Mac. Kext can handle things like device driver functionality, used in networking, endpoint security software, and things like that. And for a long time, Apple has seen them as sort of risky, right? First of all, because there's basically not a lot of room for error when you're programming for the kernel. So a badly developed kext could cause stability issues. And then, basically it's also a security risk, because the more people you're letting into the kernel, the more people you're letting, write code that's going to run with kernel privileges, the greater the risk. So when Catalina came out last year, Apple said, okay, that's it. We're getting rid of kexts. We're replacing them. They're going to be replaced with something called system extensions and something called driver kit. And so developers will now be able to get kernel functionality without actually having code that runs in the kernel. And basically, it's been a long, slow road to actually doing this. And it still doesn't even look like Apple's going to completely kill kexts when Big Sur rolls out, but they're definitely continuing to move in that direction. So there's like this ever-growing list of deprecated kernel extensions that now have alternatives, either system extensions or driver kit alternatives. And starting in Big Sur, developers have to use them whenever they're available, right? Because if they don't, the kernel just isn't going to load a kext anymore if it knows that there should be a system extension or like a driver kit alternative in the app and it doesn't find it. So basically your app, I guess, just won't work the way it should or just won't run at all if that happens.
Okay, so let's move now to stuff that's less under the hood and more in your face. Starting with the website access control for Safari extensions. What is that and what does it do?
Like if you've added browser extensions to Safari, you'll now be able to control how much access those extensions have to web pages that you visit.
Okay, why would that be an issue? I mean, isn't it up to me, the information that I offer to a website that I go to?
Yeah, absolutely. But we're not talking about stuff that you choose to give. Like this is more about information that you may be giving an extension without even realizing it. And that can actually be pretty significant because browser extensions, they're fairly powerful. They have a lot of access to what you do online. So, for example, some browser extensions will ask for permissions to read and alter content on web pages that you visit, access your web history, microphone, camera, make changes to your files, see your geographic location. This sounds familiar, right? Like this is a lot of the stuff we worry about when we talk about apps and app permissions, yeah? So, and as with apps, right, it's not to say that there's automatically anything like, inherently sinister here, right? If you say installed a browser extension that helps you find coupon codes or comparison shop on a marketplace website, like on Amazon, like between different vendors or sellers or whatever, it needs to be able to see what website you're on, right? It needs to be able to alter page content so it can show you alerts and discounts and whatnot. Or like if you're using ad block extensions, those can't block ads and stop them from loading or wipe them out or whatever, if you don't let it alter the HTML on the page you're on. But in the past, there have been lots of issues with extensions, either collecting excessive user data and then like turning around and monetizing it, or there have been issues with extensions inadvertently exposing user data, which I think is what happened with the Grammarly extension a while back. And then there are like just straight up scammy, malicious extensions, which is something you've seen a lot of on the Chrome web store, unfortunately. And Apple just made it easier for developers to port their Chrome and Firefox extensions to Safari. So on the one hand, that's great because now Safari users are going to have more variety in terms of how they can customize their browser. But on the other hand, it might mean you see Apple having a harder time checking and vetting everything that's on offer now. So hopefully by being able to give people this kind of more granular control over the browser extension permissions, the new Safari is going to go a long way to helping users decide and control what they do and don't share with those extensions.
Okay, so website access control for Safari extensions should guard against that.
Yeah, yes, basically, because it really limits the scope of access that an extension has. So, I mean, you can say like, yes, okay, this extension has X, Y, and Z permissions, and those might even be pretty extensive permissions, but only on this one website or only for this one time. And so the way it works is if you land on a web page you haven't visited before, you'll be prompted to grant an extension access to that page. I think it's either for a single use or for one day or all the time, if you really trust the extension, I guess, or you really want it to work on that page. And so, to me, that's useful if there are certain extensions that maybe you only use on a handful of sites, or maybe you only use once in a while, and that you think, really don't need access to your entire web history. And even with Big Sur looking out for you, it's a good idea to see what extensions you have installed and what kind of access they have. So if you want to check that, when you've got Safari running, go Safari in the menu bar, go to Preferences, and you'll see a number of tabs. You go to the Extensions tab, and you just see there a list of all the installed Safari extensions and the permissions they have. And there are even little check boxes next to them if you want to temporarily turn one off or turn it back on.
Now, this one, I think, is one that people might have actually already seen. It's coming in Big Sur, but it's actually already out, I believe, in Safari 14. A privacy report in Safari.
Yeah, people may have seen this. Apple released Safari 14 earlier in the fall. But if you haven't upgraded to that, macOS Big Sur is going to ship with Safari 14. So if you're going to go to Big Sur, you're going to go to Safari 14. And what Privacy Report does is it allows you to see which websites are attempting to track you around the web. And this is going to show you this feature is going to show you trackers that Safari is already blocked, right? So it's not like you need to take any additional steps here. And if you want to use Privacy Report, just go to Safari in the menu bar, click on Privacy Report, and you'll see two tabs. You'll see a tab for websites that lets you see which sites have attempted to track you. I think it's a rolling like over the last 30 days. And it tells you, how many trackers they've used. And then there's also a tab for trackers. And this lets you know which trackers we're seeing most frequently, like across all websites. And if you're on a website and you just want to see the Privacy Report data for that one site, up in the Safari toolbar, there's a Privacy Report icon. And if you click on that, you'll see whether or not a website's using trackers. And you can actually click on trackers on this web page for a more detailed look at what's going on.
Now, I know I talked about this next one with Nicholas Raba and Nicholas Tacek right after WWDC. But remind us, if you will, about the Mac App Store privacy information.
Yeah, starting later this year, all apps in the Mac App Store are going to need to provide information about their privacy practices, including data collection and data sharing activities. So back at WWDC, when Apple introduced it, they kind of compared it to nutritional labels you find on food, right? Nutrition information on the side of your cereal box or whatever. And the idea is, it should be easy to read, easy to understand, and let people make their own informed decisions about what they're consuming, or in this case, what they're installing. And so when you go to an apps page in the App Store, there'll be a special section that displays this information. And you can take a look at how an app handles user privacy before you decide to download it. It's still under development. I think they're still getting ready to roll it out, so it may follow the Big Sur release, but it's expected, at some point it's expected in a future OS update, at least before the end of the year.
Yeah, I know I covered it on macOS Ken, actually. I don't know when they're going to roll out the labels so that we can all see them, but developers do have to have the information in by the 8th of December. So,
There you go.
whether it's going to roll out on the 9th of December or whether they have to have it in by the 8th so it can be there on the 8th, most definitely coming soon. We'll get personal with Big Sur privacy tweaks in a moment, but first a word about MacScan 3 from SecureMac. Chances are you're doing more with your computer today than you were this time last year, certainly, thanks to all the staying in and social distancing, the working from home, the schooling at home. It's not that you're doing anything particularly risky, but with our depending on our computers more these days, it would be much worse to have something bad happen to it. You need a good anti-malware solution like MacScan 3. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by SecureMac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for the Mac for over 20 years. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. Then once you decide to buy for less. You can take a little off the cost of your subscription to MacScan 3 with offer code CHECKLIST. Try it first, watch it kick those tracking cookies to the curb. Then when you're ready to buy for less with offer code CHECKLIST at securemac.com/MacScan. Nick Leone is here with us today talking about some of the privacy changes coming to macOS 11. Yes, macOS 11 Big Sur. We've done some under-the-hood stuff. We did some stuff that was more accessible. We arrive now at the downright personal. The next security feature we're hitting in Big Sur, password monitoring in Safari.
Yeah, doesn't get much more personal than that, right? So if you're saving passwords in Safari, your browser is going to let you know if there's a problem with any of them. And first of all, where you look for this, and then we'll get into what kind of problems we're talking about. You go to Safari in the menu bar, go to Preferences, and then go to Passwords. And then here you'll actually need to enter your user password in order to access the feature.
Now, what's weird is if I've already got a password, it seems like I'm done. What kind of problems actually are we talking about with the passwords?
Well, so I was playing around with this, right? I created a few fake accounts at different websites, and I did all the things we tell people not to do, right? Like I used intentionally bad passwords like password 123 or my name and my birth year, or I use the same password across several sites. And so if you do this, or if you're just using credentials that have appeared in a known data breach, which Apple's also going to be monitoring for with this tool, you're going to see a little warning icon next to the problem account when you go into that password area. And if you click on it, you get some information about what the problem is and some security recommendations. And, I think in my case, it was Apple just basically politely saying, your password is really terrible. You need to change it now. So this is great, right? So, check this periodically. If you see that there's an issue, check what the issue is, and then follow the recommendations Safari gives you, and you'll be able to make sure that you're always using a safe password. And, I know we tell people to use password managers a lot. I'm sure lots of people listening are already doing that anyway, right? But if you aren't, and you want to use Safari to store passwords, another thing to mention here is that like full-featured password managers, you can also use Safari to generate secure passwords when you set up a new account, right? So when you're setting up, like say you're setting up a new email account or something, on that sign-up page where you have a form field to enter your new password 2 times or whatever, in that little form field, you'll see a little key icon. And if you click on that, you'll see an option labeled Suggest New Password. If you click on that, Safari will just automatically generate a really strong password for you. So, it'll look like gibberish, right? And if you click use strong password, that's the password that gets stored in Safari for use on that site in the future.
And of course, the really cool thing is if you're signed into all of your devices with the same stuff, that will carry over to your phone, your iPad, your things like that as well. I assume that was something that I turned on a long time ago. I don't know whether that's automatic or not, but I was afraid to use those really secure passwords at first because I thought, how am I ever going to remember that for my phone? And the answer is you don't, because if you're, deep enough in the Apple ecosystem, your phone knows your computer and, they talk to each other. It's keychain is what we're talking about. So the last feature that we're hitting today, and this doesn't sound like a security feature, but I'm willing to hear you out. Faster updates.
Right. So in macOS Big Sur, your routine software updates are going to begin in the background, and you'll be able to continue working on your Mac for part of the update process now. And Apple also claims, I guess we'll see, but they say that the update process is going to be faster than ever before. So to me, this is kind of a nice thing. It's certainly convenient, but it's also a security feature because, as anybody who's listened to the checklist for more than 5 minutes knows, it's really important to update your OS and your software regularly, from a security standpoint, right? And I think a lot of people postpone updates when they're really busy and they feel like they can't afford to have their computer inaccessible for, however long the update's going to take for that indeterminate amount of time that you're offline until the thing finishes updating. And to me now, if people know they can keep working for part of the process, and if maybe after the first couple of updates they start to get the feeling that, oh, gee, it really doesn't take that long anymore, perhaps we'll see a larger percentage of people updating in a more timely fashion, and maybe even switching over to automatic updates, which I like, and I know you don't. But I don't know. I mean, maybe there's room for a little PSA here for any listeners who don't read the SecureMac blog. Here's a good example just from this week or last week of why we say it's really important to keep on top of our updates. So Apple recently just rolled out a round of updates to all its OSs. And on iOS, macOS, iPadOS, and watchOS, there were a few of these patched vulnerabilities where Apple said in its security notes, oh, by the way, hey, we're aware that there are reports that these vulnerabilities are being exploited in the wild. And usually, when they mention a potentially exploitable vulnerability in a security note, it's something that, this could allow code execution on a compromised machine or something like that, right? But the wording here was quite different. And now they didn't say exactly what those exploits were or how serious or how widespread they were, or even if they think those reports from security researchers are accurate, right? But again, here's a good example of something that needs to be patched right away because it's potentially, anyway, under active attack.
All right, hold on. Now let me defend myself really quickly. Because here's the thing. What we've always talked about on this show is you need to be sure you keep on top of your updates. And for almost everybody, I agree with you. Automatic updates are the way to go. For me personally, I don't, for a lot of the reasons that you were talking about. But the other thing is what I do on a daily basis, probably 7 days a week, definitely 6 days a week, is keep up with Apple news. And so I'm not going to forget that there is an update. Now, I will say, I'll usually wait a day or two to make sure everything, shakes out properly. I did all of these updates day of because of the thing you're talking about. So, yeah, I'm mostly with you. And this time I'm 100% with you. For people who aren't, though, or for people who don't even realize you can do that, walk them through, if you would, the steps for setting up the automatic updates.
Okay. So if you do want to do the automatic updates thing, in Big Sur, you'd go to the Apple menu, go to System Preferences, and then go to Software Update. And you'll see a little checkbox that says Automatically Keep My Mac Up to Date. Check that, and you'll get your automatic updates. And there's also an Advanced button in that same menu area. And if you click on that, you'll see the option to automatically install app updates from the App Store.
Of course, by now you know Nick writes for the SecureMac site. If you go to securemac.com/news, you can keep up with some of what he's keeping up with. You can also follow him on Twitter at Nick Leon Ruiz. That's NickLeonRuiz at Nick Leon Ruiz. And thanks again to Nick Leon for joining us today. If you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. There you'll find notes for this show, for the last show we did, all the way back to the very first show, and you can listen to each show right there as well. It all starts in one place, securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you would like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we'll talk to you next week.